Hello friends, welcome back. I hope you're having a wonderful day. In this video I am going to talk to you all about switching between butter and oil in your baking recipes. I had been scrolling through my YouTube comments and something that I commonly get asked is, can I replace butter with oil and vice versa? For those of you looking for a quick and simple answer, that answer is yes. Of course, you can do whatever you like. There are no rules and it's fun to experiment. However, don't expect the same results. Baking is a science which involves a chemical reaction. So if you start changing the starting materials, the way in which they're combined, the conditions in which the reaction takes place, you're going to produce different results. However, with an increased understanding of the science behind it all, and the more practice you have, the easier it's going to be to obtain perfect results every time. If we want to start substituting ingredients in any recipe, we need to know the specific function of that particular ingredient, i.e. the role it plays in our chosen recipe. Most ingredients have more than one function. Some are directly interchangeable, some not so much. Butter and oil have different structures and therefore slightly different properties, and they are not directly interchangeable. However, they do share many of the same functions. I will now give you some examples to explain this a little bit further. Let's say you want to make a classic Victoria sandwich cake. The process involves creaming together the butter and sugar until light and fluffy. By doing so, you are incorporating air bubbles into the mix, which expand during baking, and this assists in the leavening process. Butter also contains water. These water droplets evaporate into steam during the baking, and again, that contributes to leavening. Other functions include contributing to tenderness, moistness, adding flavour, of course, and various other less important functions. Now, let's take oil. Oil also contributes to tenderness, adding moistness, adding flavour, depending on the type of oil used. However, it does not contribute to leavening, nor does it contain any water. In this example, it is generally not recommended to replace the butter with oil because although you will still produce quite a moist and tender cake, it's also likely that it will end up quite heavy and dense, which is not exactly ideal. A better option would be to replace that butter with a baking margarine, or you could use a completely different recipe altogether that calls for either oil or melted butter. If the butter is melted rather than beaten or whipped, it's not really contributing to the leavening process as much, so you can easily switch that out for oil. Recipe examples could include muffins, quick sweet breads such as banana bread, carrot cake. No doubt if you search the internet you will find hundreds more. If you do want to make the substitution, bear in mind that butter is around 80% fat, 18% water and 2% milk solids, whereas oil is 100% fat. So you may want to use, say, 20% less oil in your recipe and make up that 20% with another liquid of some sort like milk. Or rather than switching out the whole amount, you could do 50-50. So 50% butter, 50% oil to start with. Knowing what to do really comes down to experience and knowledge. If you are confident enough to play around, then why not? Why not experiment? You might create something truly amazing. I will now briefly cover some other baked goods such as biscuits, cookies, brownies, pastries. When it comes to biscuits, butter is primarily used for flavour. In my opinion, an all butter biscuit is just superior to all other biscuits. Shortbread, just wow. Most of the biscuits you see on the supermarket shelves today, such as, digestives, rich teas, bourbons, custard creams, are not made with butter because it's just too expensive for the manufacturers. So if flavour isn't that important to you, then yes, you can switch the butter out for oil. I would say a biscuit to me generally has a crunch to it, has a snap, whereas a cookie is soft and chewy and it will bend if you try and snap it. So you might find that a biscuit made with oil doesn't have that same crunchy crispness. It'll probably be a little bit softer. So I personally wouldn't switch it out unless the recipe specifically called for that. However, if you're, say, making some cookies, oil could work quite well. Brownies are very dense and moist and fudgy and chocolatey. Yeah, so the butter is not exactly contributing to the evening, it's mainly just there for flavour like biscuits. So there's no reason why you can't substitute that for oil if the flavour isn't really that important to you, or you can use a margarine. In fact, thinking about it, I would say all of the brownie recipes that I have ever used call for the butter to be melted anyway, and there are hundreds of recipes out there that use oil. If you search for vegan brownie recipes, you will find tons. And now let's move on to pastry. Like biscuits, an all butter pastry, well, there's nothing else like it. Nothing really can replace the flavour that butter provides. It's just beautiful. And I generally wouldn't recommend using an oil instead of butter when it comes to pastry. I have seen a few recipes which do call for oil. They tend to be like pie crusts, short crust pastry. When it comes to laminated doughs, so things like puff pastry, croissants, that kind of thing, the butter contributes to flakiness in the pastry because chunks of the solid fat melt during baking, the water evaporates, turning into steam, and that assists in the leavening, causing it to puff up. So oil is not really going to do that since oil contains no water. You could substitute it out for a high fat specialty baking margarine. Don't use margarines that you spread on your bread, they are no good. Or a shortening of some kind. I feel I have covered the main points here. I could go into much further depth on this subject and talk to you about the chemistry behind it all. However, I will perhaps save that for another video. If you have any specific questions, please do pop them in the comments below. I do read all my comments and I'm very honest with people. If I don't have knowledge on something, I will just say so, or I will go away and do my own research. I am happy to help however I can. And that brings us to the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. I truly appreciate your time and I will see you in the next one. Bye.